morning. It's 6:05 here on a Thursday. This is the Morning Buzz. I'm your host, Kat Peterson. We should be able to remove illegal aliens from our country as easily as the citizens of Martha's Vineyard deported illegal aliens from their island. Bottom line, imagine if there were Republican attorney generals who actually prosecuted violent Democrat murderers in their state the way Letitia James prosecutes Donald Trump and his entire family in New York. Imagine if we were to have the same sort of urgency from our Republican attorney generals. First, this hour on the Morning Buzz, we will talk about the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre. She's black, she's lesbian. I have to preface that because it's very important to her. She made a slip up. She made a big misstep when she admitted that they were coordinating with the state and local authorities in Delaware over reports that there might be a flight of illegal aliens being sent there by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Oh, no. The illegal aliens weren't even in Joe Biden's home state yet, but the White House was already talking about how to deal with them. It was hilarious. Next, we're going to talk about Chicago, and it seems intent on replacing Martha's Vineyard with national headlines about hypocrisy over treatment of border crossers. Bougie, liberal Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, they're being widely ridiculed for promptly shipping out some 50 Venezuelan immigrants flown in from Florida. But that's nothing compared to Chicago, which is boasted of being America's most immigrant-friendly city. We welcome them all. According to Wire Points, Chicago is now looking to Central Illinois. That's us, folks. Bloomington, Normal, Peoria. They're looking to Central Illinois to help deal with this overflow of bust immigrants. Chicago is reaching out to other cities across Illinois for help as it deals with this influx of illegal aliens bussed in by red state governors. Then, it's a sad story, but I got to cover it. This extremist liberal who murdered a teenager, his name's Kaylor Ellingson, over a political dispute, was released from jail in North Dakota on $50,000 bail. But first, Illinoisans, we pay the nation's highest property taxes to fund an education system that's allowing tens of thousands of students to graduate without them being college or career ready. Illinois education system definitely needs some sort of reform. And if you care about property taxes, if you care about parents' rights or union powers and the future of Illinois, you should care about Amendment 1. It's a referendum that's going to be on the November 2022 ballot. And with me to talk about it today is Ted DaBrowski. Ted DaBrowski, how you doing? Ted DaBrowski?
I'm doing great. Sorry, Kat.
Oh, no, you're good.
Hey.
You're good. Ted DaBrowski is the president of Wire Points, and they had been in Arthur, Illinois, kind of doing a town hall roundtable. Can you tell me what you were hearing at this roundtable in Arthur, Illinois, and a little bit about Amendment 1 and any kind of traction the opposition has gotten? Because it appears to me that there is just a lot of proposition for this and a lot of money going into the getting the vote out when it comes to Amendment 1.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interest in Amendment 1 because the people who finally heard about it had not heard about it before. It's not something being widely talked about. And people want to understand what is the true impact. There's television ads running now by the supporters of the amendment, television ads saying vote yes. There's not that much vote no out there. So people were keen to find out, and what they're hearing is something that concerns them a lot. This is an amendment that would give Illinois public sector unions the biggest powers in the country by far. No state will have done, if Amendment 1 passes, no state will have done what Illinois would do in giving the public union powers and more rights and enshrining those in the Constitution. And that should concern a lot of people. If you want much bigger public sector union powers in Illinois, this is the amendment for you. But if you're concerned about the high property taxes we have, if you're concerned about parents' rights being cut over the last few years, then Amendment 1 is something you should be really concerned about.
Now, when you say parents' rights, how would parents' rights be impacted by this? Is it the Chicago Teachers Union?
Well, yeah, not just the Chicago Teachers Union, but when you think about COVID and you think about the powers that teachers unions had in determining school policy, whether schools stayed open or not, whether kids were masked or not, forcing of vaccinations, all that stuff, has to do with unions' influence. In Illinois today, even before we talk about Amendment 1 and the Constitution, they have some of the biggest powers in the country. In Illinois, we're just one of 13 states that allows teachers to strike. So imagine in the future, and we can talk about what this amendment means, but in the future, if the unions had even more power in the Constitution, then they could stick stuff into their contracts, and negotiating contracts, perhaps on things like critical race theory, on things like COVID masks, or sex ed in kindergarten, things like that. If they put that in the contracts and they're protected by the Constitution, then it would be really hard for parents to push back, and it would be hard for legislators to unwind things because the powers are in the Constitution.
Do you think, and this is the originality of this referendum, who came up with it, and what exactly is it, the wording? Because I think that's going to be huge, is the wording on the ballot. If it says workers' rights, then everybody's going to vote yes on it. I believe that if it says workers' rights in there on that question, people are just going to be like, okay, workers' rights, of course I'm for that. And people not even know, they go in and they don't even know that question, that referendum is on the ballot. Do you have the exact phrasing of the question yet?
Well, it's going to say proposed amendment to add Section 25 to Article 1 of the Illinois Constitution. So, right there, it doesn't say amendments rights. It doesn't say Amendment 1. It just says a proposed amendment to add Section 25 to Article 1 of the Illinois Constitution. So, right there, I don't know, what are people going to think with that? It's the first thing. They might skip it. They might, not be aware. You can bet that the people who are in the public sector unions will know exactly what this is and vote for it. And the question is, will people who don't know what it is, what will they do with it? And of course, it has little arguments for and against, and it tells us about workers' safety and all that. Yeah, it can be pretty confusing, and that's why it's so important to understand what this thing is, and to get engaged and determine whether you like it or not.
Yeah, and I'm not going to push back on you too much, but you had said that this referendum is going to really help public sector union guys, but I don't think that the little guy who's in some sort of public sector union, so say a Chicago teacher, right, is in the Chicago Teachers Union, or, some sort of teacher is in a union, they never help teachers. That's what I've always understood, and a lot of unions, I know somebody who works with Pepsi, they've got a big union, and they are constantly negotiating contracts that are not for the guy actually out there working. It's always the bigwigs within the public sector unions who get what they want, and the little guy is always screwed. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong.
Well, you got to think about the pension crisis in Illinois. You got to think about. So here's how to think about it. First, there's one big thing. This amendment, although there are claims by the supporters of the amendment that it covers the private sector unions, it does not. And that's, everybody agrees on that, even though they still run the ads that say it does. So federal law is what covers private sector union rights. And federal law supersedes, it trumps, it preempts anything that the state does. So this amendment has no impact on the private sector. So if people think they're voting to help private sector workers, this doesn't do that. This is all about public sector. The second thing one should understand about public sector is when you're in the public sector, you get long-term guaranteed contracts. Most of the public sector has the 3 to 5 to 7 year contracts. Mm-hmm. And in there are guaranteed raises, guaranteed protections, there's benefits. If you're in the public sector, you get a guaranteed pension for life. You get things like sick leave. You get all these pension pickups. You get all kinds of stuff. If you're not in the public sector, you're in the private sector. In the private sector, nobody gets that stuff. But you're forced to pay. You're forced to pay through your property taxes and other things for those people who get that. So we've got two classes of people right now: the public sector workers and the private sector workers. And the problem is that this amendment would put all those powers that the unions already have into the Constitution, and therefore, what's a private what's a private sector person do other than get stuck with paying higher and higher and higher taxes?
Right,
And
exactly.
fewer and fewer rights.
Now, don't you have like a specific number of how much our property taxes are going to go up because of this amendment one if it were to get passed?
Well, I don't, but what I remind people, and again, this, some people want this thing, right? If you want more property taxes in Illinois, again, this is the amendment for you. Mm-hmm. We have not run a number, because I don't think we can run a number on this. Mm-hmm. We already, without this constitutional amendment, we in Illinois already pay the highest property taxes in the country. That's how much powers the unions have. Yeah. Under this, in the future, it'd be even more. Now, IPI, Illinois Policy Institute, has run a number. They looked at the history and said if we keep going at the same pace, it'll be over $2,000. Mm-hmm. I personally think that's understated, because with the pension crisis we have and with more union powers, there's no way to stop the property taxes from going up.
So it would go up increment after every single year, right? I mean, it's just
Why not? They have the powers, and the school boards, for example, won't have the power to fight back. It's across every unit of government. They will have more power.
I'm going to ask you this. We're talking with Ted DaBrowski from Wire Points, and he had just recently held this amazing town hall out in Arthur, Illinois. I know a couple people who went, and they said they absolutely loved it. But we're talking with Ted. I wanted to ask you, why do you think the originator of this referendum, I don't know who it was and who decided that this needed to be a referendum on the ballot. I'm sure that there was a process to try to get it onto the ballot. Why do you think that they initially did this? Is it because of the teachers' union? They want the teachers' unions to have more power because of things like COVID, masking, CRT? Is it the schools that they're trying to please? Because I'd imagine the public sector unions, like you said, they've already got a lot of power. I'd imagine somebody in the public, some sort of public sector union, talked to somebody in the government to try to get this passed.
Well, there's one more twist to this thing. I mentioned that the private sector isn't covered by this amendment. There is one thing that it does cover for the private sector, and what it does, it says Illinois can't be a right-to-work state. Right to work. If we were to become a right to work state, that means that people in the private sector would have a choice of whether or not to join a union. If they were to go to a place that had a union, right now you have to join it. You're required to in Illinois. We're not a right to work state. If we became a right to work state, then people would have a choice of whether to join a union or not.
And that's great. And a lot of states are right to work.
That's right. So more than half the states in the country are right to work, and all of our neighboring states are already right to work, except for Missouri. So this amendment would block Illinois from becoming right to work. It would make us less competitive. It would block it forever. So in other words, we could not, 5 years from now, move to right to work. So there's that one thing in there. So some of the private sector unions want that. There's plenty here, but I think overall, for 50 years, unions, in particular the public sector unions, and the legislators have been working together to give the unions more power. They take care of each other. Unions vote for the politicians. The politicians give them more power. And so we've evolved into a system where there's this great partnership between unions and politicians, and they take care of each other. This would be kind of the capstone. We could finally put all those powers that they've been building over the 50 years into the Constitution.
Yeah. So then there would be
lock it in.
There would be no need for a politician ever for a public sector union to get what they want. They just get what they want because it's enshrined in the Constitution. There's nothing you can do legislatively to combat some sort of collective bargaining that they try to execute.
Well, listen to this, Kat. I mean, this is amazing. So in that amendment, it also says there shall be no law passed that diminishes the workers' rights to negotiate over a bunch of things, a bunch of stuff, economic welfare. They put that into law in there so that, imagine if the legislators wanted to pass some law that, let's say, reduces the cost of government, whatever. Let's say consolidate a bunch of government units, which would mean some losses of jobs. This thing says they can't do that. So your legislators are taken out of the equation. They can't fight for you for lower property taxes, or maybe they want to take on this parents' rights stuff. Well, they can't because the Constitution now says no law shall be passed. So it's an amazing power grab by the unions and the politicians who signed off on it.
Ted DaBrowski, we are pushing up against a break, but as always, thank you so much for joining me here on the Morning Buzz. And folks, I'm going to let Ted tell you where you can find out more information about Amendment 1. They've got an amazing site on wirepoints.org. Ted, where can we find out more?
Yeah, if you go to wirepoints.org, that's our site, and you'll see a red button that says Amendment 1. Just click on it, and it'll take you to the detail, what the amendment says, and we break it out for you, make it easy, some pros and cons on the amendment. And then you can also sign up for our daily newsletter where we'll keep sending you information on this. Wirepoints.org.
Thank you so much, Ted DaBrowski. You have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you, Kat.